Welcome back to the Sega Guys podcast, Sega fans, where 25 years on from the last Sega hardware launch, the dream will never die. I'm Dan, the Mega Driver, and here's the snake to my Lara Croft. Easy there. It's James from Segaholic. How you doing, mate?
Wow. Arakan, can you read me? I'm good, mate. How's yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. I had to pick a couple of icons from the games we're going to talk about today, and Snake and Lara Croft made conjure images in the adolescent minds of 90s kids. But I think it leads us into in what we're talking about today, which we'll get onto shortly. But how you been doing, mate?
Not bad. Just I've been quite busy with the old content train. Been firing the videos out, as people have noticed that are either new to the channel or been a subscriber for a while. But it's been busy, mate. But apart from that, usual, just working away, trying to enjoy the odd game where I can. I say that it's the usual. It's nothing exciting or adventurous. It's just quite short Sega Rally, bit of Crazy Taxi, the usual kind of stuff. The good quick hit go to stuff. But just the same old, mate. With yourself?
Yeah, all good, mate. As you say, the content train has been running. Did finish Yakuza Like a Dragon finally. Absolutely loved it. The payoff at the end was fantastic, and I cannot wait for The Man Who Erased His Name, which is coming out at the time of recording in 7 days, I think. And then we've got obviously with Daytona 2 in tow, and then Infinite Wealth next year. That's just 3 months away. Finished Sonic Superstars, which I absolutely adored. One of my favourite games this year. I did my impressions video, and I was like, yeah, it's a good 7 out of 10. By the time I'd finished with it, I think I put 20 odd hours into it in the space of a week, which is crazy for me. I absolutely loved it. So it's great. Plus, channel opened up its membership, which has been great. Yes. I'd like to thank all the members for their support, and all the continued viewers for their support. It's been, to be honest, if we're talking about, it's more than we ever imagined we'd get to in the space of just over a year since we launched the channel proper. So thank you everyone for your support, and thank you members for your support. It really does, we do this out of our own pocket. There are costs involved, and it really does help out a lot in helping keeping the channel going and helping us curate this Sega content for you all.
Aye, and it's something that we the membership thing, we had been planning it in terms of trying to tailor it to get it right, because like a massive bugbear of you and I is like whenever like a channel will start out and they'll give you everything, and then they'll kind of grow and they'll get the numbers, and then they lock content that used to be free behind a paywall. And we were adamant we weren't going to do that. So as I say, we've got the core membership, we've got the premium membership, and there's nothing of the regular content that you enjoy today for free that will be taken away. It's just a case of, it's to give people who want to support us, there's no obligation to do so. It's just a case of, if you feel that what we do is something that you enjoy watching and you want to kind of contribute and support us, you can. If you don't, it's all good. We're still here.
Yeah, and there's a bit of bonus content, and it's all stuff that's like outtakes from previous podcasts and gameplay footage that we record gameplay and we use it in the videos, and we just had the idea that it's a nice little bit of added value, for our members. So it's just for those of you that aren't members, nothing changes. You still get your weekly review, your fortnightly podcast, and your fortnightly shorter content, whether that's race, or whether that's fight, or whether it's 10 things we love about Sega, or whatever it is that we've conjured up in our Sega crazed minds at that time. So hopefully everyone is enjoying the content. But mate, we're going to be talking kind of at Sega sideways on this one today, because we're going to be talking about games that aren't Sega games, and for a reason. And I think the reason why this topic pops up in my head is because, as we featured on the channel recently, we've had the fantastic, absolutely outstanding Outrun R-Type port to the Mega Drive by the Robo Z. Absolutely phenomenal. And in the meantime, another fan port that we've been monitoring very closely is the Final Fight port, which I think you've played that, haven't you? Played the demo.
Yeah, so I'd played. There's been further builds. So Mauro, who's been doing it along, she's working with Master Linkway and another couple of people in the community who have done previous kind of work on like the Street Fighter 2. I think Pyron might be involved as well. But the first build that he put out to the public, there was quite a bit of slowdown. So the levels are, I think you get the first three levels. I mean, if you got on the train section in particular, there was quite a bit of slowdown on it. And he's got to the bottom of that and he's fixed it. So those builds are on his Patreon, but you can go on and join it for like £1 and get access.
Yeah.
You can donate what you want to when you get access to the latest builds.
And he's again, he deserves
Oh,
the
aye.
support in the time and effort and the talent that's on show
Aye.
that he's put into that. It's phenomenal.
Aye, to build that kind of game from scratch, and it's so good. Like even whenever the bits that had a bit of slowdown in it, it was just the whole. It looks great, runs in the main absolutely brilliant. The arcade soundtrack has been carried over. I know, like people are big fans of the Mega CD version for a reason because of that soundtrack, but the arcade soundtrack brought across to the stock Mega Drive sounds great. And from what I've read, in future there's going to be two builds. So he's going to have Mega Final Fight, which is basically the port Final Fight with all the extra like characters and bells and whistles that he's wanting to add. And then there's just going to be the stock Final Fight build, which will so you'll have the two to pick from. So again, it's a slow, but I know Mauro had some kind of health issues. I think he's problem with his eyes and stuff that caused him to take a bit of a break, and he's tweeted that he's kind of back on the train now. But aye, it's crazy to see what's been done, retrospectively with a lot of the Sega hardware. And as you say, that's what kind of drove this kind of topic is the fact that we're seeing so much innovation, we're seeing so much creativity in the community, and it makes you wonder that could some of the games that we feel could and should have been on Sega hardware, is there a chance that somebody might be able to bring them back?
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, so that is the topic of conversation for the day, and we've chosen a selection of pretty big named games that never found their way to any. Well, most of them didn't make their way to any Sega hardware. One of them just missed out on a certain piece of Sega hardware we'll get onto. But you look at things like the port of R-Type, the port of Final Fight, the port of Mega Man X on the Mega Drive, which is another brilliant fan game. The Turtles arcade port that's coming to the Sega Master System, another great one there. All these games, all this content, which for various reasons was locked out away from Sega back in the day, and stuff that for some of these games there was rumors that they were going to come to the hardware. In some cases, some of the games that we were discussing, I don't think it was the case with any of the ones that we got on this list, but some games have had like leaked prototypes. There's been proof of concept builds. And I think the interesting thing as we get into these is, could the console have done it at the time? What stopped it from coming to the console? And could it have helped the console in a way, depending on what system it was coming to? So I think it's going to be a good chat, mate.
No, definitely. I think, and as we said, that the level of innovation that we're seeing in the community, it's showing that there's a lot of untapped potential in a lot of these systems. I was talking to somebody on X the other day, and I was saying about that the Mega Drive in particular, we're now seeing what it's truly capable of, and they kind of disagreed a wee bit, saying that, well, are you saying that developers didn't push the Mega Drive to its limits in the day? And I was saying, well, yeah, they did with the tools they had available.
Yeah.
But nowadays, there's better tools. There's no constraints in the Mega Drive's case. There's no constraints on memory for the size of the game. An EverDrive or an emulator can have any ROM size that you want. So, it's just things are advancing and giving people who have got that creativity in them and that skill set to just go crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think some of these may be a tall order, but but we'll jump straight in. So I think the first game that I've got on my list here that could and should have come to a Sega console is a massive one, and that is Grand Theft Auto 3. For me, this was the game that was when the PS2 arrived, and I think the PS2 had been at least out in Japan for at least 18 months at that point. perhaps even longer. And it'd been over in the West for quite a while, and for all that time, it felt like, is this it? You know,
Aye, you're not wrong.
all these people have been hanging around, passing up on the Dreamcast, and then you got yours on launch. I got mine. I got mine after playing Grand Theft Auto 3, but it was just like it. The library just wasn't there, particularly at launch. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto 3 was almost an event, and that was when it had arrived. But I think there was rumours of a Dreamcast port at one point. And it's one of those, similar to another game that we'll get onto this list later, where I think someone had said that the Dreamcast couldn't do it, the Dreamcast couldn't do a port of Grand Theft Auto 3. I don't know what your thoughts are, mate, but I think when I look at Grand Theft Auto 3, and I was literally just playing the Xbox version just now to capture footage for this episode. When I look at Grand Theft Auto 3 and I look at the environments and I look at the traffic and I look at the population, I look at how things move in there, and I compare it to things like Crazy Taxi, or I compare it to things like the motorbike section in Headhunter, and I think, well, I think it could. Now you might lose some levels of detail, you might lose some of the effects, but in terms of having again, Shenmue, another example where you've got a lot of NPCs. The NPCs in Shenmue are a lot more detailed than Grand Theft Auto. The vehicles are a lot busier in Crazy Taxi, and it runs a lot faster than Grand Theft Auto. Headhunter as well, the detail on his motorbike, the speed that he moves around, and the scale of the city, again, very comparable to Grand Theft Auto. I think it could have done it.
No, I'm totally agreeing with me. I don't think there's anything. You look back at it, it's quite a basic looking game. It does the job, but it's not. Even back then, it wasn't going to win any awards for being a standout. It is very. It's basic but effective in what it does, and I think that was mainly because of the sheer scale of it. And I think, if I remember, on the 5 or 6 part Xbox documentary that came out, there was a mention that Microsoft had a panel of people that were sent submissions for games to go on the platform, and they approved or declined them. And someone came in from Rockstar and pitched GTA 3, and they were told, bearing in mind that at that point Microsoft are the newcomers to this business, they've worked in PC gaming, but in this console space they were still new, and they said that they didn't see the value in it, and they passed it up. And of course it then went on to PS2 and was an absolute smash. It sold consoles on its own, and rightly so. It's an absolutely phenomenal game, but some people cite that obviously the storage would be an issue. It came out on PS2, so I had DVD for the storage. But Sega weren't afraid to ship games on multiple GD-ROMs at that point. You look at Shenmue 1 and 2, prime example, no problem at all. So the idea of swapping discs was not something that people kind of balked at. Back then it was quite a common thing. Panzer Dragoon Saga, 4 discs, You get to the end, save, put your next disc in, keep on going where you left off. Metal Gear Solid on PS1, 2 discs. Just disc swapping was a common thing. So I don't think that would have put anybody off. So the storage medium, I don't think is a valid argument. What I think GTA 3 could have brought to the table different and on the Dreamcast would have been, I think it could have leveraged the on-site, the online part.
Yeah.
That could have been something, whether it be, I don't know, vehicles or weapons, or you could buy an outfit for different missions, suits and different things and all that. But they're just at that point, and Peter Moore said that to us as well, they were at the cusp of that kind of that online era. That's what it was all about at that point, and they pushed it online. And I think, given the event that GTA 3 was, marrying that with the online space that Dreamcast was trying to push, there could have been something there that would have worked well together. Now, people might argue that GTA 3 became an event because it was on PS2, would it have been the same event had it been on Dreamcast? But that's sort of for people to decide. But it would certainly have got attention. It would certainly have turned eyes onto Dreamcast, that's for sure, because the move to a fully 3D Grand Theft Auto, it was like, yourself, it was all top down 2D to that point to all of a sudden be exploring a city and radio stations that you could, hear real music and do other, notorious things, commit
Yeah.
crimes and take your car around the back alley with certain people, and you know where I'm going. But
Oh no, yeah.
aye, so it just added. There was just so much. Just created this whole world, and I think it could have easily been done on Dreamcast, as you said. Crazy Taxi. Look how fast that moves. Look at the detail. It's and Crazy Taxi in itself, even though if you play it and you think about the world of Crazy Taxi, it's obviously not as big as GTA 3, but it's still it's a big map.
It's a massive, yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot going on there. So, no, you know, a rather long winded way to say I could have done it, mate.
Yeah, and the thing is, I look at there's a port that came later, um, and that's the iOS port. And the iOS port came to was it iPhone 4?
Yes, I've read
Um,
about it. I had that, a GTA 3 Vice City, San Andreas, and is it Chinatown Wars?
I
Which
think
was a kind
Chinatown
of,
was, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that was a
That was a
DS
top-down
game.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, but very
I
good
too.
actually. That one.
I had fun with that. I
Yeah,
used to play it on iPad quite a lot. I so they've been out for a long time as well,
yeah,
as you say, about iPhone 4 or 5, around about that kind of time, so a long time ago.
yeah. So the reason why I mentioned that is a couple of reasons because I remember when it got announced, and it was for like iPhone 4. I think it was for iPhone 4 or iPhone 5. It was quite a long time ago. And I remember thinking, this is on a phone. And then I was like, oh come on. I looked at the iPhone specs and saw that it uses a certain the processor was clocked at whatever, which I think was 200, 400 megahertz, something like that. And the graphics chipset was Power VR. And I was like, come on. It's basically a Dreamcast. And the download size was just over a gig. So I was thinking, well, that's your power, and that's your size issue is pretty much sorted in that one port. Whatever it is they did to get it working on iOS is what they probably could have done. Obviously, we're talking, a good. It was still a good 9 years later with
Aye,
advances
because
in graphics and compression technology. Um, but still, part of me thinks, if you go back, it really could have done it. Crazy Taxi runs at a solid 60 frames per second, whereas Grand Theft Auto 3 runs at, I think, runs at 30, doesn't it? And I
yeah,
think even then it's not locked on PS2. And I think what was good in John Linneman's video when he did coverage of kind of the remastered collection, and he looked at all the previous versions, was just talking about the post-processing effects on PS2, and I think they are really nice. They're not as nice on the Xbox version that I was playing and capturing footage for earlier. And I think the Dreamcast might have lost a lot of that post-processing stuff, but I think it would have still turned in a very tidy version
why?
of Grand Theft Auto 3. And even if you had to swap discs, whether it is when you advanced to a certain point of the story, or when it was, you had a disc for each island and you had to change this whenever you went, because the PlayStation 2 version loads every time you move from island to
Aye,
island, doesn't it?
yep.
So however it was that they get around it, or unless it was all capable of fitting on a single disc, like a single gig, like the iOS releases, who knows? But I think it could have released on the Dreamcast. Whether it would have been kind of another Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider came to the Saturn first, and it didn't have the impact Tomb Raider had on the PlayStation when it came on the PlayStation later. Who knows? But it would have been great for Dreamcast fans if it came to the Dreamcast, and it would have been, if it was a shot in the arm for the console, that would have been fantastic. And I think the real reason why it never came was because two reasons outside of the actual could it do it question is one, it was late enough in the Dreamcast life that by the time it released on PS2, the platform was basically dead anyway. And two, when you go look back on that Xbox documentary and they talk about that they had an opportunity to bring it to Xbox, I think it's quite clear that Rockstar were looking for extra funding and an exclusivity agreement to bring it over. So I think it's more that Sony, paid for that timed exclusivity
Yep.
rather than the Dreamcast could do it.
Aye, that's too two valid points, mate. I mean, it's just it's funny you're talking about like this is on a phone because slight tangent. I remember I had Soul Calibur on the iPhone 4, right? And the Soul Calibur iOS port was great, by the way. It was didn't have the mission battle mode. It was just bare bones arcade mode, but 60 FPS. It was on the Retina display. The iPhone 4 was the first iPhone that you didn't
Yeah.
see any pixels. It was a Retina display, and it looked great. And I always remember I was on the bus and back home from work, and somebody sat down next to me. I was in the up at the back seat in the bus. I was in the middle of the aisle, and a guy sat next to me, and I had my headphones in, but they weren't fully on, and I could feel I'm playing with Killick, and I'm pulling off on a touchscreen on an iPhone 4. I'm still pulling off some of the moves. The guy was on his phone to somebody next, and he goes, "There's a guy playing Soul Calibur on a phone." Always remember that. I could just feel him. I'm sitting there just playing away. I could feel the eyes looking down. I'm like, I just heard them. This guy's playing Soul Calibur on a phone.
Yeah.
You know. So you're right though, mate. I mean, I think iPhone 4 was 2009, 2000.
Yeah. 2009, I think.
9, 10. Well, Steve Jobs passed away 2010, 11. No, 2011, I think it was.
Yeah.
And it was 4S came out just after he passed away, and 4S had Siri. So the iPhone 5, so it would have been about then, right? So, as you say, mate, compression techniques and whatnot for graphics would have been a lot more advanced in that decade that's
Yeah.
passed since Dreamcast, but there's no reason why they just couldn't have put it across. You see, a disc for each island, or a break at certain points of the story. No, and there's nothing there visually that makes me go, nah, I couldn't have done it.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. 2011, apparently, it says it came to mobile devices. I'm sure it came before that, though. Especially, I'm pretty sure it was very much a case that it came to iOS first. So, I mean, here it's talking about Samsung Galaxy S2 and Motorola Zoom. But no, I thought it was stunning. I got it when it came out.
I'm wondering if it's actually still available. Hold on a
It would have
second.
been well, it could have been purged.
Because I'm literally just checking my purchases just now, by the way. Right, Grand Theft Auto. Mate,
So,
they're still there.
yeah, I imagine they probably did get up. They still probably did get updated.
Yeah, San Andreas Vice City. Although Chinatown Wars isn't there. No, it is. Yeah, mate, I've not played a game on my phone for a long time.
No,
A long time.
I think we're going on a tangent a little bit now, but it's like it's like there was that whole thing recently where Apple started promoting the fact that the new Resident Evil 4 remake is now playable on iPhones.
Is it?
Yeah, the latest iPhones capable of playing Resident Evil 4 remake, which is a current gen game. And it's just one of these things where people are, oh wow, that's amazing. Phones are caught up with consoles, and then you looked at the guy playing it, and it was all these wires going to his TV, and then there's like all these adapters coming out of his phone. It's just like, nah.
No.
It's one of those. Oh, it's on a phone, and nobody wears off, and just like, yeah, I'm not. Sticks to my consoles.
Aye, 100%.
But yeah, that's Grand Theft Auto 3, mate. It would have been a seismic one to come to the Dreamcast. Next one I have is pretty broad, because I've got any entry to almost any system. this is Final Fantasy. Now, obviously, I think any of the 9 could have come to any of the intervening Sega consoles. I think the first one is probably one of the most obvious examples, where you've got the original came out on the Famicom in 1987, probably the same year that the Master System launched in the US, and it came to the MSX shortly after. Obviously, came west in 1990. But part of me just thinks, it's coming to the MSX, and it's on the Famicom. Could quite easily come to the Master System. Master System could have easily managed a port of any of the first 3 Final Fantasy games. One I'm a big fan of. Love that one. There's just a simplicity about his approach that I love. And 3 as well is a fantastic game. And yeah, I just wonder, could it have come to the 8-bit systems? Could 4, 5, or 6 have come to the Mega Drive or Genesis? A little bit of a taller ass because the SNES is higher color palette, although clearly not impossible. Similar with the Mode 7 effects that he uses, but again, there's workarounds on them. You think of the sliding doors moment where Squaresoft, not as going to best say Square Enix then, Squaresoft, part ways with Nintendo on the N64 about the CD drive or lack of in the N64, and like we need someone to put Final Fantasy VII, and it's Sega that come in and go, well, what about us? Put Final Fantasy VII on the Saturn. And then I think 8 and 9 were later in the year. I think 9 overlapped with the Dreamcast, and would have been fun to see that on the Dreamcast as well. So I do wonder what it was that kept Square from doing anything on a Sega system. We had Enix games. Obviously, the two companies were completely separate entities then. We had Enix games, particularly on the Sega Saturn, but never a Final Fantasy and never a Squaresoft game. And I do wonder whether that was licensing. I'd imagine for Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, almost certainly was a case that Sony had paid for exclusivity.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And imagine it may have been the exclusive licensing agreements on the Nintendo side for 1 to 6. Or maybe it was the fact that Sega were making their own RPG series and the Fantasy Star games, and Square saw them kind of as a rival in a very similar way to Namco did to an extent.
Aye. No, I mean, we all know Final Fantasy VII is the ultimate game changer. It just changed the course of the whole console war in Japan. But it's a weird one. Why Square or Squaresoft at that time had never worked with Sega at all across any of their platforms. I think maybe the Fantasy Star games, maybe they might well have seen it as it was too much to compete with. I mean, they wanted to move away from Nintendo because was it either down to delays for the N64 or they wanted to move away from the whole, I think the aspect of being on CD was appealing. It was more storage and they were able to tell a better story in terms of like FMV and music and stuff like that.
It was very much a case. There was two major points from what I remember, and there may be people in the comments shouting at me being wrong, but from what I recall, there was two major issues. The first was storage, because they wanted to tell obviously a very big story with FMV, and obviously they couldn't do that on an N64 cartridge. They wanted to be on a CD for that. But the second point was the fact that the kind of the more adult elements in there. There's points in Final Fantasy VII where you dress, as outrageous as it was back then. There's points where the main character dresses as a woman, and there's points where you're in a brothel. And Nintendo weren't comfortable with that approach at the time. So
that's right. Aye.
So they wanted to censor or remove those. They wanted Square to censor or remove those bits, and that was another point where Square was like, well, let's step away from there and let's explore other options. And Sony came knocking, but if sliding doors moment could have been Sega. Final Fantasy VII, as much as, and I've gone on a rant about it being I love Final Fantasy VII. I kind of have this thing where it's mostly nostalgia, and when I look at it objectively, I don't think it's that good. But when I've got my nostalgia goggles on, I absolutely love it.
Jason's throwing things at the telly.
No, I bought a copy of the Switch port because I'm desperate to replay it, because it's a really odd game, because there's things about it that are really inconsistent. The art style is really inconsistent from scene to scene, from FMV to battle to the overworld. The art, the graphic design of it changes so much. But the reason why I bring that up is because I look at it and I think it's nothing. The Final Fantasy VII is nothing the Saturn couldn't have done.
Absolutely not.
This is 3D characters against 2D backgrounds. We saw something similar to that in Shining Force 3 in the battle sequences, and that was some absolutely huge polygonal characters. The PlayStation version, I don't think they're fully texture mapped, and they also the game runs at about 15 frames per second. But in the battle sequences, it runs at about 15 frames per second, which no one really batted an eyelid back then. But I think the Saturn could have probably done all those without too much of an issue, and it would have been fine. I think 8 and 9 might have been a little bit too far for the Saturn graphically, and that's why I mentioned the Dreamcast, because the time periods for those two games kind of overlap with the Dreamcast itself. But yeah, sliding doors moment. You imagine Final Fantasy VII coming to the Saturn. Imagine the original Final Fantasy coming to the Master System. Might have, or the Mark III in Japan might have brought that. Given that console shot in the arm over there.
You know, if the relationship had been, nurtured back in those days, then there's every chance that later on it could well have been a Saturn game for Final Fantasy VII. But
yeah,
there's nothing that you look at like the exploration parts, the kind of top down semi kind of isometric view. The wee characters have got literally no texture mapping on them. They're just blocky wee characters. 2D, hand drawn kind of by the looks of it, kind of like backdrops. Saturn could have done them standing on its head. 2D, not a problem. 2D powerhouse. So the argument people have is that they say the Saturn would have done the 3D fight parts poorer.
Yeah.
Or the summons, like would Shiva have looked quite as good, and the effects and all that kind of thing. But again, they're not massively complex. As you're saying, they're not running at like massively high frame rates. So yeah, some of the maybe the flames or the frost effects. Who was the name of the big lion thing that does the fire? That's the one. And people again, Jason will be, how do you not know that? But those maybe effects might have had mesh as opposed to transparencies or whatever, I don't know. But again, it's nothing that at that time, again, it's over 3 discs, Final Fantasy VII?
3 discs, yeah.
3. So again, disc swapping's not an issue, so that's looking at it. I think the 2D elements would have looked absolutely stunning, the artwork style on Saturn. Maybe the 3D fights, as I said, those sections may have taken a wee bit of a hit, but not considerably enough to make it cringeworthy enough to say, oh, that it just looks rotten. It could easily have done it.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the other thing that I think it could have struggled with is kind of the FMV transitions, and I don't mean like the full motion video 6 sections, but the bit where it's a kind of a seamless transition from gameplay, or even when the gameplay overlaps with FMV, where, like for example, very early on in the game when you blow up the reactor and you're running away, and then you're this kind of the change from a 2D backdrop to an actual video is seamless, or I don't know if the Saturn had the technology, because PlayStation loved doing that. PlayStation loved throwing little bits of video in the background, didn't it? That was like, look what I can do.
Aye.
It was really cool, actually.
Aye, and like I said in a previous show as well, like how much does Sony on the PS1 days, they just loved a bit of FMV.
They did, yeah.
Like every game had either an FMV intro or something that you would sit and go, "Oh, if only the game could look like that,"
And then you realise, go.
No, just the bit you were talking about, whenever the transition as well, like whenever you jump on, you have to catch the train.
Yeah.
And you jump off the bridge, and you just press X to go off and it just instantly cuts, and the train goes under the tunnel, and you jump on top of it. So, I know what you mean about that, mate.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. Again, don't think it would have changed. It would have changed the fortunes to the Saturn if it was Final Fantasy VII on the Saturn instead of the PS1. Not sure if it would have had an impact anywhere else except for maybe the Master System in the early days, or the Dreamcast if it saw a port of 8 or 9. But yeah, it would have been fun to play, because Xbox fans, Square Enix, you always forget about us. It's like, look, think of us Sega fans. We've got nothing at all.
I know. People going, when are you giving us Final Fantasy VII Remake on Xbox? Like Sega fans that we've had nothing, mate. It's like,
yeah, exactly. But there we go. And then, mate, I think we've talked about this next one so many times. But as our good friend David of the Shiro podcast says, everything bears repeating, and I think this one does. This is Tomb Raider 2 on the could have come to the Sega Saturn. And I think we've had a few conversations on this. We had a good chat with John Lindemann on Twitter about this one once upon a time. But I think it's another one worth revisiting, especially with the new update for Tomb Raider that went out that you did a great little video for. in the back of my mind, I still feel that there's something that Saturn could have done to turn in a version of Tomb Raider 2. And
Aye.
again, the reason we were given at the time was that the Saturn couldn't handle it. But we know the official reason was that Sony paid for exclusive rights for Tomb Raider on console. That's why you didn't see it on the N64. So yes, maybe the frame rate would have been a bit lower, the textures muddier, the geometry reduced, but you think, even if Sega, knowing what a big game it would have been, would have had some guys that went in and helped Core, because the relationship, that's the thing, the relationship between Core and Sega was at one time so strong. You think it could have done it, and it should have come to Saturn, especially since Tomb Raider was the first place where first appeared on the Sega Saturn.
It's a topic, and I think that it gets me quite annoyed when I hear about this whole the Saturn couldn't handle it. Now, the various kind of talk and rumours and stories that have gone on over the years that, again, there's been never any kind of confirmation of it, but from what I've read and heard is that Core were creating Tomb Raider 2 on Saturn with a new engine that would be done in quads to then help with the Saturn port of Tomb Raider 2 being even better in terms because the criticisms of the first one was they were valid. It didn't look as good as the PS1 version, and nobody's going to turn around and say otherwise. There are bits where it slows down massively, but it didn't detract. I played Tomb Raider start to finish on the Saturn. I got it on the PS1 way later, like years later, budget release or something, because I got my PS1 in Christmas '97, so like it was way later. But there's another thing as well that, and again, you might have heard this and can corroborate it whether it's true or not. But the Tomb Raider one on Saturn, did it not only use VDP one?
Yeah, I believe that's I need to check. I need to double check, but I'm pretty
Aye,
sure the rumor was
it's
that you used just one SH2 and one VDP.
so again, if you're not, because I'm sure somebody's done a screenshot of Tomb Raider and they've rotated it and it's broke down, and it's just all these quads that are layered.
Mm-hmm.
And as they rotate the camera, they break up and it shows you how they're layered. Now you're thinking if you're using VDP2 to draw the floors, the ceiling, if you're using, I think VDP2 can do what's it, five layers, and then
Yeah,
it can call in the frame buffer from VDP1 as a 6 layer kind of thing.
yeah,
So if you're using all those tricks together, then why, if you're not using the full potential of the Saturn for the first game, and if you're building this engine that's going to use quads, and then for the first game you didn't use all the proper tech that was in the Saturn, there's no reason why it couldn't have done Tomb Raider 2.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. I think. I mean, obviously, the problem with using the VDP2 layers is that you can't distort them, so they have to be flat. And there's plenty of
Mm.
like uneven surfaces in Tomb Raider 2, but you could have deployed it in certain ways. The water, for example, there would have been definitely an efficiency there to get it deployed over the water as a water surface, skyboxes and all that sort of stuff. So, with some trickery and using the two SH2s effectively, definitely could have been a serviceable port of Tomb Raider 2 on the Saturn. I know that there's parts of the game that look like they probably could be taxing, like Venice, for example. Um, but still, you look at other games. I mean, you look at Burning Rangers, which obviously that game has its graphical issues. And I think Burning Rangers gets some stick because of its graphical issues, but I don't think it's anything other than it was kind of rushed at the end of the Sega Saturn's life. Because I was thinking the other day, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here to make this point, but Sonic Team, they finished Knights in 1996, which was their first game since Sonic and Knuckles. And then they were straight on to Sonic Jam doing the Sonic World. And then not 6 months later, Burning Rangers pops out. And then 9, 10 months after that, you got Sonic Adventure. So I was thinking, well, they probably had to get Burning Rangers out pretty quickly to get all the manpower on Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast in 1998. Just think with a bit more polish, Burning Rangers could have really been, all those flickering polygons, etc., could have been gone. And that's, that game doesn't use VDP2 an awful lot for surfaces, etc., that's all polygonal. And some of those, like when you get to the last act and you're kind of in that big space station, you're looking out and there's all these flames dancing around. That's a pretty comparable sized area to what you see in Tomb Raider. And you've got water surfaces and different lighting effects and all these things moving around and all these objects. So I think based on that evidence, and I'm probably going to be using Burning Ranges for another example when we talk about it later on, but I think based on that evidence, the Saturn could have done it.
Aye, and well, you were making great points there. I just pulled up Sega Retro just because we're big on making sure information that we give out is correct.
Yeah.
So I was just talking from what had come to my mind there, but just looking at it here. So from Sega Retro saying here, on a technical level, VDP2 is rarely used in the game, with the vast majority of work being handled by VDP1, therefore using only a fraction of the Saturn's power. So There we go.
Yeah. So you use all of the Sega Saturn's power, and it becomes a lot more of a manageable exercise to bring that over. Of course, it's easy with all the stigma that was all the everything that's been said about the Saturn. So it's easy to say, "Oh, it couldn't do it. You couldn't do it." And it comes back to that Daytona USA. Look at that. It couldn't do Daytona and Virtua Fighter, and we both know that was just Daytona especially was a bad first impression. But and you look at what came later, and you think, the Saturn could have done that.
Yeah,
not
but
easily.
But I still think Tomb Raider 2 will come.
Well, yeah.
I think Retro Raider joining the team, they did a great job with unfinished business. Again, I was talking to Dave about this as well. It's dark, in places. I was kind of tweaking with the kind of the color levels as well, and to try and see. I thought it was like maybe my settings or something on my TV or my capture card, and like it was kind of crushing the blacks a bit. And I was turning up the contrast to see if there was any detail in those dark areas, but there's nothing. So it's not as if the Saturn version of Tomb Raider is naturally darker. Anyway, I think it's because of the way VDP1 does its shaders, but it's naturally darker. But the fact that they've managed to port that over, and someone in, I think, in the comments of the video I did said, that the water effect, it hurt their eyes, and I can see why someone would say that, because looking at it, all those wee lines drawn on top of a surface, moving about, and that, whenever you're standing at the ledge and you overlook that vast area of water, I can get why that, but I kind of take a step back and say, well, that was how the Saturn drew water in Tomb Raider. That's just how it looked. But we've already seen those guys taking some of Tomb Raider 2's levels and skinning the Tomb Raider 1 engine with them. So, again, if they're able to somehow, I don't know if Unfinished Business uses more of the Saturn's power than what Core managed to use, or whether it's just a straight engine used and map it on, I don't know. But I still think there's every chance. It might not be, next year. It might be 18, 24 months away. It could, but however long it takes them, I think we will get justice, mate. We will see Tomb Raider 2 on the Sega Saturn, So it could, should, and it damn well should have been on Saturn.
It should have been, mate. Moving on then. So the next one I've got is well, I think everyone knows that we both love our footy. And this one, I think we had a bit of a chat about this one, mate, and I don't think you can say that the Sega Saturn was short of football games.
No.
It had pretty much every major series that was around at the time present on it, not least the fact that Sega's own efforts were absolutely astounding. Brilliant games on there, so the worldwide soccer games. But the Dreamcast, despite sponsoring several European football teams, including Arsenal, didn't really have a decent football game. Sega Worldwide Soccer 2000 was pretty poor. Euro Edition was a decent upgrade, but still by no means a great football game to the level that we'd seen before. There was no FIFA. There was an International Superstar Soccer game that was planned but was cancelled. But what would have been fantastic would have been to get the Pro Evolution series, or even the precursor to that, which was International Superstar Soccer Pro Evolution, on the Dreamcast. That really would have filled the gap left by the absence of EA and the absence of a decent football game from Sega. Because I remember playing ISS Pro Evolution on the PS1 for the first time, and that was an astounding game. That came out in 1999. So if you think of an enhanced version of that coming to Dreamcast with the Master League intact,
Oh, Master League.
that could have been something really special. Would have really scratched that football itch that we were desperate for back in the day.
Oh, and that's the thing, right? It can't be understated the impact that Pez had, right? Like when Pez came out, Pro Evolution Soccer came out on PS2. Like I was what 23, 24 when about then. So it was early 2000s, and at that time you had like obviously the Premier League's booming. I went to play five-a-sides in a league twice a week. They had PlayStation pods and goals, which is the five-a-side centre, with Pez running in the bar. Like you would go and you get up and go and play football with your mates. You come home and you'd watch football with your mates. Then you would play Pez against your mates. Like at that whole 20-something generation at that time, Pez was massive. I mean, the Worldwide Soccer game done by, was it Silicon Dreams it did?
Yeah.
Aye. It looked okay, but I've said this before in the Football World Cup episode we did. I thought the animations for the players were really poor. They ran awkward looking.
It didn't. The problem with it is it hadn't evolved from Olympic soccer
That's
on the
right.
Saturn.
Aye. Yep. It was like a higher res version of that.
Yeah.
So, aye. It just, it's baffling. I mean, to go for what you had in the Saturn, obviously Worldwide Soccer 96, 97 or 97, 98, to go from that to this was just jarring. But Pez, mate, we talked about whether GTA 3 could have been enough of an event to sell Dreamcasts, and we thought, well, that married with PS2 is what made it what it was. I think that Pro Evolution Soccer on Dreamcast, I don't care about events or size of audience or whatever. I just think having that game on your platform at that time, it just, talk about a product of its time. Pez, just that mid-20s culture, mate. Premier League, playing five-a-sides, going out with your mates. It was just a package. I can't understate how big a deal Pez was back then.
I'm sure there's members of, maybe unfortunately not our US viewers and listeners, but certainly those in the UK. I mean, I was in sixth form, so I was 17, 18 when the first one came. It was 2001, wasn't it?
All
so
right,
I would have been
mate,
18, 17.
Right.
And then, through the years, it really was. We'd get up on Saturday. I'd go knock for my mate. We'd go down the pub. We'd sit in the pub all day, watch Soccer Saturday until the live game came on. Then we'd watch the live game, and then we'd go out, and then we'd end up back at someone's house with a load of beers, all gathered around Pro Evolution Soccer. It's probably, talking about it now, probably alien to a lot of younger people because all they know is FIFA and playing that online. FIFA
Ultimate
Team.
Team.
Yeah, but it was culture back then. Like FIFA could get a look in. FIFA was almost dead compared to PS because PES was so popular. It was unreal when the amount of smoke-filled living rooms sat into the evenings, cans and cans of beer everywhere, playing your Master League or playing your mates all the way into the wee hours of the morning. It was magic, mate, and people bought PlayStations just to play that game, and it really could have, if it came to the Dreamcast, even if Sega fans just got a taste of that, it could have been something special. Wouldn't have saved it in America, but it might have saved it in the UK at least, where we were just football mad.
I think as well, mate, like I remember, again, I've told the story about how I got a chipped PS2 or a chipped a PS2 Slim just for Initial D. It's a guy in my work who burned a modded version of Winning 11. I don't know what one it was, right? Mate, it put all the proper kits into it. It added chants. So it was like, for example, if you went to Stamford Bridge, because the actual stadiums, but you had the Chelsea, Chelsea, Chelsea. You had that chant, right? Sorry, mate. I know you don't want to hear that, right? But it added all these things in. It was also one of my earliest memories of seeing a community modding a game. And I remember as well, you could go on eBay and buy a memory card. Now,
Yep,
see,
yep.
like he's nodding, he
Yeah,
knows
no.
because you had the editor in PES, and if you had the patience to sit and type names in with a controller into an on-screen keyboard, you could edit the names, the kits within reason, hairstyles, faces, everything. You could edit players to make them look as close and have their real names in the game because obviously certain teams weren't licensed, most of the teams weren't licensed, but you could go on and there was like people would know how to skin the kits to put as close as possible to the real kits of that time. Edited all the names, all the appearances, and you get sent a memory card for 15 quid with a save file on it, and you had official Pez. It
Yeah,
was like, oh, honestly, so good.
yeah, it was a culture. It was a phenomenon. It was just, it really was just part of our makeup in those years.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's just there was certainly no argument that the Dreamcast couldn't have done it. It could have done it hands
off
down,
of
as I said.
course, aye,
Could have done the Pro Evolution that came to the PS2, or it could have done ISS Pro Evolution that came to the PS1 later, and done an upscaled version. However, I mean those Pro Evolution ISS Pro Evolution games, they're outstanding as well. They're
aye,
absolutely phenomenal. I've got them on my in my PS1 collection in there somewhere. They're absolutely phenomenal games to still play today. And
aye.
yeah, I just would have loved to have them on Dreamcast just to give it that shot in the arm. And you see that Dreamcast and Sega advertising in the Champions League, and you think, right, well, that's where I'm going to play my Pro Evo. It's just a shame that it never manifested, but what could have been? And I don't know if you can play Pro Evo or ISS Pro Evolution via Bleemcast. I don't know if that's one of the supported games, but
Mm.
I'd love to see it playable on Dreamcast one way. It's kind of a bittersweet. What could have been, or what you could have won.
Aye, and I think as well, and we kind of touched on this before we hit record as well, is that when we're seeing so much advancement in Mega Drive, we're seeing a lot of advancement in Saturn. Look at like Cold Case, Silent Hill slash the Medium.
Yeah,
Bringing in parts of a modern day, a current gen game with dual worlds and rotate the camera and see between them. I would love to see someone in the kind of indie scene for Dreamcast move away from 2D platformers. Like, see, as lovely as Intrepid as he looks, for example, like that's not what the Dreamcast is about, in my opinion. Right? Dreamcast is there's power sitting there, and I know like these guys are making these games using lesser tools. They don't have access to the full SDK and all that kind of thing. But I would just love to see the day where they maybe get their hands on the libraries, they get their hands on a dev kit, and they're able to do something above, like to take it to that level. Bring over something like try and replicate like a PES idea. So just try and do something a bit different
yeah.
than 2D platformer stuff because there's potential in there. And I think as these guys get more skilled at what they're doing, I'm hoping as the years advance that we do start to see like Dreamcast starting to really surprise us in what the community actually produce.
Yeah, I'd agree, mate. I think the Saturn had its big breakthrough a few years ago when when it got cracked and people managed to get into it, and now we're seeing the fruits of that effort in manifesting in numerous ways. And yeah, it'd be wonderful to see some Dreamcast games where the community can really push the hardware. But in terms of simply astounding fan projects, there's some great ones out there for the Saturn, and I think that's a nice little segue into the fifth game on this list, um, which is Metal Gear Solid. I never heard this rumor back in the day that someone from the Konami E3 floor suggests it's coming to
Yes.
Sega Saturn as well. I didn't hear that, but then Metal Gear Solid wasn't really on my radar until I actually until the Saturn pretty much was kind of abandoned in in the West, and kind of the Dreamcast was on the horizon, and the first shots of Metal Gear Solid were coming out. And of course, at that time, they're not going to say that they're not going to announce any games for Saturn. But the idea that it could have come to Saturn is wonderful. For me, Metal Gear Solid is the best game on the PlayStation 1, hands down. I absolutely adore that game. I was tempted to buy the new collection until I realised it's utter garbage.
It's not. I seen John Linneman kind of was quite annoyed at the performance aspect of it. So, just Konami being Konami these days, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're as much as we bemoan that Sega don't look after their IPs, they do to an extent. Konami are just something else, though. But yeah, I've always said, and again, I'm going to go back to the Burning Rangers example here, because Burning Rangers was from 1998, and as was Metal Gear Solid also 1998. Both fully 3D environments with fairly huge interactive worlds. Burning Rangers actually a lot more open and 3D with a lot more verticality than Metal Gear. And I think the Saturn could have turned in a serviceable port of Metal Gear. And then when you look at Cold Case, and when you look at the tech demo that was done recently, you think, yeah. And what I love about the tech demo is it's just so quintessentially Sega Saturn. The icons, the start button, the resolution, and everything is it's Metal Gear, but it's Sega Saturn, and I just absolutely love that.
You can see it. It's just got those trademark, like the way the textures look, just the kind of colours, everything about it. It just looks. It's as if someone's just put Metal Gear through a Saturn filter. It's brilliant. But yeah, it was Frogbull.
That's it. Yeah,
is the developer of this. Now, when this came out, I put a tweet out about it. Going Metal Gear Solid on the Sega Saturn, and it got a shitload of traction, right? And Pat from Shiro actually reached out to me and said, very friendly advice, and I'm thankful to him for it, just to say, don't run anything on your channel about it yet, because we don't want it to be a hoax at that point, because at that point there was nothing, nobody had got their hands on it, nobody had a build, nobody's seen any proof that it was anything other than just what it was, like a tech demo. There was no proof it was running on a Saturn yet. So Pat had said, we're trying to find out, just maybe hang fire. And I thought, given that the tweet I put out had like 25,000 in terms of like views on it, I'm like, Jesus Christ, it was getting retweets and quote tweets, and for not being a premium or blue member, it was picking up a lot of traction. So I thought, no, so I deleted it. And then, like a few days later, the Shiro guys actually, now it was XL2 on the Shiro Discord, had actually got a hold of a playable ISO from Frogbull and had verified that it was real. So then, whenever Shiro ran the story, I've kind of retweeted that back out. But and his exact words on the Discord were, for those who doubted, I can confirm that the Metal Gear Solid demo is 100% legit, including the intro screen, the splash screen, and all. And just to make sure they add to the legitimacy, they even put Sagata Sanshiro in the codec screen just to kind of show, which is just brilliant. So, yeah, it did turn out. I can understand why there was a bit of debate about it, because it's quite easy, I think, with the way the Saturn kind of scene is just now. It's quite kind of bubbling away nicely. There's a lot going on there, and maybe somebody could put something out that's not real to get a bit of attention. But no, it is genuine. So fair play to Frogbull. Now, I don't think there's any plans to build on it. There's no enemies in the kind of the tech demo. It's just that opening section, as you come out of the sub and you swim to the wee factory kind of bit, and you climb out and whatnot. If I remember from watching, there's a couple of the wee kind of brown parcels of health packs scattered about, and you go in and you can pick you can filter between your SIGs and your goggles and stuff like that, and you hear the wee noise, and it looks, it just, as I said, it's like someone put Metal Gear Solid through a Saturn filter. It looks bloody great. I would selfishly sitting here going, I would love it if they expanded on it, but to ask somebody to port the full Metal Gear Solid to Saturn, that's a big big undertaking. But you know, I don't know if the performance would take a hit when he added enemies in there. But then Metal Gear Solid didn't overwhelm me with enemies. It's a stealth game. You maybe only had two, three at most
Yeah,
within sight. So
even when the alarm was going off, you rarely had more than three. I don't think I can't even recall. Maybe on a higher difficulty, you might have had more. I
aye.
think it's quite cool. And when I think about when I was looking at the demo, I was thinking, well, he's rendered everything in polygons. And unlike some of the other games we talked about in here, Metal Gear is actually quite flat especially when you're in the facilities. When you get outside in the snow, there's a lot of verticality, and then you've got the areas with the stairs. Um, but for the most part, you could make some efficiencies by again deploying VDP to the secret source, as as John said the other day. But yeah, I think you could make some efficiencies there. The one thing that I think it would have struggled with is the final boss battle with Metal Gear X, because that very much is very impressive boss fight actually. Because you've got this giant mech moving around in a fully 3D environment. But yeah, oh god, I love Metal Gear though. It's been a while since I played it. I think I need to revisit it. In fact, I'll probably play it. Oh, there'll be hopefully be a little bit of footage alongside this, and I'll be
Yeah,
playing it that way.
I mean, Frogbill has said that they won't publicly share the prototype for fear of it being burned and
Yeah,
reproduced and sold on eBay. I can understand that. However, I would absolutely love it if he's given it to someone who's friendly with Shiro. If he was happy to send us it to have a look at, because we'd never share it either.
no,
So the guy doesn't know us from Adam, but I'd love him if he could, not love him, but love it if he could send us a copy of the build to have a play about with, just to run it on like a Fen rear and actually see it and control Solid Snake
yeah,
on your Saturn would be brilliant. But I can understand his stance, because sadly there is people out there who would probably slap it on a disc, make a case for it. You can imagine it being on like Etsy or some shit like that, Metal Gear Solid on Saturn, and it's literally just one room,
yeah,
but there are some unscrupulous people out there who would take advantage of it. So I can understand his stance,
yeah.
but I'd love to try it. I'd absolutely love to try it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like Grandia. The English translation of that is just an absolute labour of love. And you've got the splash screen that boots up every time that I try to continue my save. 50 hours in, I will finish it. But you get the Sega Extreme Splash saying if you've paid for this, then you've been fooled or whatever.
Aye.
And I see all these reproductions of it, obviously taking the English version. People put their heart and soul into this, and the stuff that they've done with the FMV screens is really astounding. And for someone to profit off of their work, you can understand why he doesn't want to
No.
share this demo. But yeah, if one day we do see it come to sound, as I say, mate, as you say, mate, it's probably unlikely. And it's an odd one. Obviously, it wouldn't have come. The PlayStation version didn't come out over here until '99. Obviously, in Japan, it was '98. It certainly wouldn't have saved the Saturn. It was way too late for that sort of stuff. But it would have been wonderful to play one of my favorite games of the generation on my favorite console.
Aye. I mean, the mock-up PAL Saturn case that's been done on Frogbill's video as well is just it's amazing. Honestly, it's just like, you imagine holding that, it'd be so good. But aye, never know. It might at some point down the line work on it a wee bit more and bring out something that we can all try. But until such a time, we'll put the link to his video in the description as well if you want to check it out, if you haven't already.
Yeah, unfortunately, any footage that we're showing at the moment is the PS1 version. But yeah, you imagine holding that Saturn box. Snake, check the back of the CD case. How long did you spend as a team looking in the game for the damn CD case? Where's the CD case?
Mate, do you know the one that got me in that game? I finished that game in a weekend. I was addicted to Metal. I pre-ordered it. I was addicted to Metal Gear Solid. I got it. In fact, if I remember, because I pre-ordered it for gameplay, and it always delivered early, so I got it on a Thursday. By Sunday, it was done. I was hooked on it. It was that good.
It is though. It's so good though.
But I had a Sony Trinitron TV at the time, right? And this was why they done this. You remember you turned on a Trinitron telly in that era, the writing was green.
Yeah,
You know where I'm going, don't you?
I know where you're going with this.
Psycho Mantis.
Yep.
It brings up fucking Hideo in the corner.
Yep.
And I thought my telly, because it looked exactly the same as when it says SCART. And I'm like, my screen went blank, and I'm like, no. But I'm thinking, I'm reading your mind, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm ready to fight this guy, and then my screen goes black, Hideo, and I'm like, what's happened
Yeah.
here? Mate, I'm round the back taking out SCART leads. I kid you not. And it turned out, obviously, as it transpired later on, you read in issues of PlayStation magazine later on that, that's something that was part of the gameplay mechanic. It was the trick of Psycho Mantis. He does something with the memory cards or controller ports as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Aye,
So it's like my Castlevania
bastard.
Symphony of the Night saves and Vandal Hearts. He'd be like, "You like Castlevania, don't you? Put your controller on the floor." There's nothing like that these days. I mean,
No, it was creepy, but it done it. Here's me, honestly, round the back with my telly, unplugging scarps and plugging them back in. Got me an absolute peach, and it was only because I had the telly that had
yeah.
the Sony interface, so they mirrored that. Sneaky bastard.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I mean, to round that one off, it did come to Dreamcast in a way because I think this was one of the games that you can play through
Oh,
Bleem.
Bleem, yeah, that is. Yep.
Um, and yeah, it doesn't. It looks pretty good through Bleem, but in terms of an official port, and especially if it could have come to the Saturn, that would have been special. And I think that
I
leads
don't.
us. Yeah, go on.
Just one wee thing as well. I don't know. Have you able to get Bleem working on a GDMU? Because I can't get it to run. Because I'd love to be
No.
able to play it on there. I think it's something to do with the way that you have to swap. You load one in, then and you're not able to like load Bleem and then load a game into it. I don't know if there's a package
Yeah,
version out, but it'd be great if someone could actually put them out there for the ODEs.
yeah. I've not had much luck with
No.
Bleem on GDMU. I'd love because there was individual games that were wrapped as packages. I don't know. I'd love it if we could get it to work like that. But at the moment, it's all mostly burned discs, which is I'm not too keen on putting those in my Dreamcast at the moment because the laser is dying. So
Shocker.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, mate, that's one that made its way to Sega via Bleem, and via that tech demo. Another one that did actually make its way to Sega is what we're going to end on, and this one did come to the Sega Dreamcast. But what we're going to talk about is the fact that Resident Evil 2 could and should have come to the Sega Saturn. And mate, I was desperate for this one to come to the Saturn. I actually did play um, the PS1 port early on. I'd actually played it. My friend somehow got a beta version. Don't know how he got it. He got it on he burned it onto a disc. I don't know if he must have downloaded it from somewhere. Like the like nothing was working properly. Well, certain bits weren't working. Like the characters would clip through all the scenery and everything. Um, but I loved it from what I played it in that first period, and I was desperate for it to come to the Saturn, especially since I loved the first one so much. Um, the Southern Sega gentleman did a great video on Resident
Yes.
Evil 2,
Yep. Yep.
not coming to the Saturn, but there's all sorts of talk and rumors and stuff around this port. It was in development. Some said it was in development with the software house that wasn't Capcom. It was another third party that did the original Saturn port. Some said that it was canned just because the Saturn could do it again. Some said it was canned just because they knew the Dreamcast was coming and the Saturn was dead. I remember there was an interview in Sega Saturn magazine where Rich Ledbetter said, would the 4 megabit RAM card help with some of this?
Mm-hmm.
I think they could. They said it couldn't. I get the feeling, you can never have too much RAM, especially when you're drawing characters. it felt like the Saturn was due it, and it feels sadly like a bit of a missed opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I know as you say we got it on Dreamcast eventually, but my first time seeing and playing Resident Evil 2 was a demo disc. It came with official PlayStation magazine, and I
Hmm.
remember like being really blown away by the step up
Yeah,
because it was a considerable step up. The environments were a lot more detailed, a lot more coloured, a lot more going on, like kind of like animations like flames and stuff like that, and the kind of the near kind of background, not the
yeah,
full kind of. Also, the backgrounds were drawn kind of like, again 2D, with kind of mild 3D elements, and as I say, in the kind of the closer background area to the character. But no reason why. Again, you look at the Dreamcast port of the first game on the Saturn port, sorry, the first game compared to the PS1 version, and PS1 version runs and looks better, but the Saturn version has its own charm, right? Certain people will even say they prefer the Saturn version. There you go. Jason's another one. I think he leans towards he likes the Saturn version as well. So if you're saying it went to the team that did that version, and they're going to work on the sequel, again, you're a couple of years on. You've advanced your techniques for what you can do with the hardware. The SDK is more evolved. There's a lot of 2D elements in there. The 4 meg RAM cart's a great shout. Another case study, perhaps, to bring it west.
hmm
It's because we were talking in the 4 megabyte RAM cart episode that we did a while back that would the Capcom versus games have been enough to warrant bringing that
yeah,
peripheral over. Surely a mainstream title like Resident Evil would have really made. I mean, you imagine you're bundling Resident Evil with a 4 meg RAM card to really boost it.
yeah,
But SSG's video is great. Again, I'll put that in the description as well. If people want to check that out, great channel as well, great guy. But it's just another missed opportunity. And I say, I know we got it on Dreamcast, but it really should have been on Saturn. I think what you said there about it being kind of later on. Again, I don't think it's a case of the Saturn couldn't do it. I don't believe that. And it might sound like naive thinking the Saturn's more capable than it is. I think what Resident Evil's doing is nothing beyond it, given what we'd seen the Saturn do. I just think Saturn's been a victim of its own failure essentially.
yeah,
That it's getting to the point where it's winding right down, and there's just not been deemed worthy enough to continue.
yeah. No, that's the thing, mate. I think that's the overriding feeling that I get is that um, the Saturn was on its way out. The Dreamcast is on the horizon. They probably already started planning for Code Veronica, the true Resident Evil 3 at the time. And they're like, yeah, well, there's this console that's basically dead in the West. Let's can that and move to the new one. And I don't think Resident Evil 2 came to the Dreamcast until after Code Veronica, did it?
That's right, it was. Yeah, it was after. Aye.
Yeah, I really want that version. I played it. I played it on GDMU, but it's one I really want on to play the disc on. I've got three, thankfully. Um, but I've for some reason I've got Resident Evil 2 and I've got two more discs of Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1. Somehow I've ended up with that. So that's why I have to play the classic one. Did play the remake though, on the Xbox earlier this year. That's fantastic. But yeah, it just feels like, again, kind of similar to Tomb Raider 2. Just feels like it should have been on Saturn.
Aye.
And it's kind of sad that it wasn't. I think this one's probably less likely to see the light of the day. But who knows? Maybe some prototype is hidden away somewhere. Maybe it was this Resident Evil 1.5 that was doing the rounds for a bit. Maybe they did some work on that for the Saturn. That would be absolutely fascinating to see.
I don't think there's any with Tomb Raider 2, there was definitely an element of Sony stepping in and a bit of tomfoolery going on there with them and Core. I don't think Capcom were paid off or anything by
No,
Sony in regards to that. I don't think there's anything about that. I mean, we always you said about Code Veronica being the true Resident Evil 3. That's a different story. That was obviously Sony wanted you filming in this earlier on that Code Veronica should have been Resident Evil 3, but we ended up with Nemesis being 3, which was meant to be a side story because Sony wanted a main numbered entry on their system. So, but nah, I just think Resident Evil 2 has just been a victim of Saturn's Western failure, unfortunately.
Yeah. But yeah, mate, that brings us to the end of the half dozen games we wanted to talk about. We had quite a few on this list. And yeah, it may be something that that our viewers and listeners might want for us to revisit in the future. Which it's been quite interesting talking about these, mate. Get to talk about something with a Sega slant on the games that aren't quite Sega. And there's a lot more. We've got R-Type 3 Super Star Wars as well. Maybe we'll see a port of R-Type 3 when the R-Type port is done. But maybe those could be another time. But we'll throw it over to you guys, our viewers and listeners, those of you in the Radio Sega Discord, in the comments, the live chat. What games would you have loved to see come to Sega systems? What games, what generation, what system could they have been done? Should they have been done? Why didn't they happen? Get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. As we said at the beginning, our membership is now open. So if you love what we do, please support us. There's additional bonus content in terms of gameplay footage that we record, as well as outtakes, and you also get to see some of our content a little bit earlier. And you also get, if you're a premium member, you also get a chance to help steer the direction of the show. So if you want to see more of this type of content, then that's the place to let us know.
Absolutely. So just to finish off, just a shout out obviously to the premium members. It's one of the perks that we do put on there that we do get a shout out. So G-Man, Sega Saturn lad, and of course Andy Mackey, big supporter of the show. Thank you very much to our current premium members.
Thank you very much. And just remember that the membership starts from as little as 99p, but you can still get in touch with us any other way, whether it's in the comments below, whether it's on the socials, the Radio Sega Discord, the Sega Guys Discord. But stay in touch. You can catch me at Super_D and X. You can find James at the Segaholic. You can find us both at Sega Guys. But until next time, we will see you on the Sega side.
Sega.
I run across